Coming to the simple math of new carbon tax, today we are not just talking about environmental policy, we are talking about fundamental math of how we do business with the world. On the slide, you see a block of steel shrouded in smoke with a pink euro symbol price tag attached. This illustrates the new reality. The European Union is putting a literal price on the embedded emission of our product. By the end of this session, you will understand exactly how this math works and what it means for the future of Indian steel. We will start with the timeline, move into the specific calculation for a single ton of steel, and finish with a roadmap for decarbonization. So let's look at the clock because the rules of the gram are changing very soon. So coming to the our this slide, the rules of the global trade change in January 2026. This timeline is the most important thing for your compliance team to understand. Look at the red arrow moving from left to right. We are currently in the transitional phase, which ends in December 2025. Right now, it's just about reporting. But look at that middle section. January 1st, 2026, that is what I call the financial cliff. This is when mandatory certificate purchases begin and the carbon prices actually apply to your export. By February 2027, you will be making your first full annual declaration. The free ride of reporting only is almost over. But what exactly is this toll we are about to start paying? Coming to again those uh, hardliner questions, what is CBAM? The ultimate green tariff. Think of CBAM as a high-tech border checkpoint. The illustration on the right shows a shipping container passes through a CBAM toll gate. A camera is scanning the invisible carbon inside that container. This is the European Union's way of preventing carbon leakage, essentially making sure that importers pay the same carbon price as European domestic producers. As you can see in the target sectors box on the left, uh, this doesn't just affect iron and steel, it also heating aluminium, cement, fertilizers, and even electricity. Now let's get into actual number that uh, so coming to the core equation, pricing the invisible. So this is the formula that will soon sit on your balance sheet. It's a simple multiplication embedded emission measured in tons of CO2 times the carbon price equals your CBAM tax. The key insight here, you no longer just sell steel, you are now selling the carbon it took to make it. If your carbon backpack is too heavy, your product becomes too expensive to buy. So let's open up that backpack and see what's inside a typical ton of iron, uh, Indian steel rather. So now coming to the step one in this slide, the carbon backpack, the math of 1 ton. So look at these weight stacked on a block of hot rolled coil. This is the carbon backpack for 1 ton of steel. Notice the breakdown on the right. Coking coal is the heaviest heater at 1.96 tons of CO2. Iron ore sintering adds 0.65 tons. Limestone electricity round it out. When you add it all up, a single ton of steel is carrying 3.07 tons of CO2. So that is the number that gets multiplied by the tax. Now that we have our emission number, that price will the European Union assign to it. Coming to the step 2, the price of pollution. Here is the multiplier. Based on European Union emissions trading system estimate for 2026, we are looking at a price of 70 to 80 euro per ton of CO2. So every single ton of carbon in that backpack we just looked at must be matched by a CBAM certificate at this market rate. So let's do the final math and see impact on our bottom line. So coming to our next slide, which explore about step 3, the final bill. The 20,000 surcharge. So let's look at the translation on the right hand side in red. If we take our 3.07 ton of emission and multiply it by the 70 to 80 euro price, then convert that to rupee, we get a surcharge of rupees 19,350 to 22,140 per ton of steel. So take a moment to let that sink in. This is not a marginal fee or a small administrative cost. This is a fundamental disruption of our unit economics. To see how disruptive this is, let's look at a real world export case study. So, the profit squeeze and existential business threat. This slide represents a nightmare scenario for a standard modern plant. Imagine you are exporting 100,000 tons of HRC. Your total revenue is 4,500 crore. Typically, your margin might be around 6,000 to 7,000 per ton. Now, look at the red section of that margin bar. The CBAM tax adds an additional cost of over 15,000 per ton. That's a 35% reduction in total profit margin overnight. For many plants, this tax could be higher than the entire profit margin itself. So why is India being hit so much harder than other regions? So exploring in this slide, which shows why India is in crosshair. There are three reasons why we are uniquely vulnerable. High carbon intensity. Our steel averages 2.5 ton of CO2 per ton of steel. That's the 31% higher than the global average. And that is the bottom line. Locked into the coal, 80% of our production relies on BFBF route. High export exposure, 60% of all Indian steel exports are destined for the European market. So we are heavily invested in the very process that CBAM is designed to penalize. So this creates a massive gap in competitiveness. And here the competitive reality, India versus Europe, as we can see in this comparison. As for the landed cost is concerned, look at the landed cost comparison. If both Indian and European steel have a best price of 350 euro, the Indian steel picks up a 175 euro penalty because of its high carbon footprint. Meanwhile, European steel producers have a minimal extra cost due to internal allowances. This makes Indian steel 41% to 50% more expensive overnight. Competing on the price uh, basic in nature alone is now mathematically impossible. So, what choices do we have to bridge the gap? So, the decarbonization choices, if we see the status quo versus the green route, this table shows the cost of inaction. On old plant faces the highest risk with the CBAM cost around 21,000 per ton. Even a modern plant using latest blast furnace technology only sees a marginal improvement. The green future, moving to scrap based electric arc furnaces, is the only way to get that CBAM cost down to around 9,000. That is our target. Let's look at the two most immediate way we can start lightening that carbon load. Coming to the lightening the load, two immediate green solutions. Uh, we have two levers to pull. Solution 1, solar and wind adoption. Replacing grid power with the renewables slashes our indirect emission nearly by 75%. Solution 2 is about scrap and recycling via EAF. Shifting to high quality scrap in electric arc furnaces can cut our direct emission by 50%. These are not just ideas, they are part of national strategy. So now coming to India's decarbonization roadmap, this is the path forward. Near term, we must uh, focus on renewable and waste heat recovery. Medium term, 26 to 30, we pilot green hydrogen and expand EF capacity to 20%. And long term 2030 plus, the goal is full hydrogen DRI deployment to hit a target of 1.5 ton of CO2 per ton of steel. That's the long term vision. But what do you need to do tomorrow morning? So, the action plan, what you must do now. Here is your checklist immediate. Get authorized as a CBAM declarant and finalize your 25 baseline data. Throughout 26, start your quarterly reporting and ensure you hold certificate for 50% of your emission. September 27, your first full annual declaration is due. Ongoing, you must invest in solar and scrap solutions and mandate ISO 14064 certification for transparent reporting. So let's wrap up with the new reality of our industry. So, the new reality of steel to if you look into these to summarize, CBAM has turned invisible carbon into a hard line item cost. The verdict is clear. By 2030, our competitive advantage will no longer be dictated by cheap labor or cheap coal. It will be dictated by low carbon production. Prepare today, compete tomorrow, decarbonize now.